Welcome to the Transform Your Relationship podcast, where we'll go beyond the typical relationship advice. I'm your host, Manisha Terry, somatic healing practitioner and mentor. Each week, I'll share personal insights, client success stories, and how my holistic trauma-informed approach can help you transform your relationship from the inside out. You'll learn ways to recognize and prioritize your needs, get to the root of what's upsetting you, and courageously ask for what you want so you can confidently co-create the relationship you desire. You'll also hear from guest experts who will be invited to share their unique approaches to transformation, and at the end of each episode, you'll receive one tangible practice you can implement right away to transform your relationship. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Happy September. We are already mid-September, just a couple of weeks from the fall equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere, and all over the world, we are about to welcome a change in season. I have to say that fall is definitely my favorite time of year, so I am really looking forward to slightly cooler weather, the leaves changing, and just that really cozy feel that fall brings with it. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to wait a little bit longer here in the northeast of the United States because it is still in the mid-80s today and not quite feeling it yet, but I think we are about to get that shift pretty soon. So I hope that wherever you are, you had a lovely summer or winter if you are in the southern hemisphere and you're just looking forward to a little bit of a shift in season and perhaps temperature as well. Today, I wanted to chat about something that I've seen pretty consistently in my practice over the years. Whether I was working with clients in person doing body work and they were feeling stress and tension in their body, and in the work that I'm currently doing, where I'm working with people virtually and they are bringing specific relationship challenges to the table, and that is losing oneself in a relationship. I definitely have some personal experience around this as well, and as I was reflecting on this topic, I was really just thinking about what I had noticed with clients over the years, as well as some of the feelings and other experiences that I've had where I've noticed that parts of me were slipping away in particular relationships. I think that losing oneself in relationships really goes hand in hand with people-pleasing tendencies in really interesting ways. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that as well. And just like with everything else, there's such a range in what this could look like. It could be really, really subtle and show up in very sneaky ways for some of you. And for others of you, as I talk about this, you might notice some pretty obvious ways in which this may be happening or you may be experiencing this in your life. And it might just give you a little bit more awareness of why it might be happening, like where it might have originated from, and what are some simple things you can start to do to begin to shift it. So I'll mostly be sharing from the perspective of romantic relationships, but there will definitely be a few things that I'll share about other types of relationships too, because this pattern can absolutely show up in all kinds of relationships. But I find that it's often most heightened in romantic relationships, and it's probably easier to see as well. So in something like early dating, this might look like deferring your choices to the other person, and those choices could be as simple as what movie do you want to see, or where do you want to go to dinner, or where do you want to meet up? Really simple things that probably don't have a ton of consequence. However, if that's how it starts out, even with small decisions like that, you can start to set a pattern pretty easily. And also not having that strong opinion might make you feel like you're this person that just goes with the flow and you're easygoing. I see this a lot with clients who have perhaps been called high maintenance or needy in the past. And if that has been your experience, most of us want to avoid that at all costs. And so we might contort ourselves in order not to be called high needy or high maintenance. That is a whole different topic. And if you want to dive a little bit deeper into that topic, you can check out my earlier episode, I believe it was episode 13. And it was all about having needs versus being needy in your relationship, because there's definitely a difference. And I will also say that if you truly are in a place of high need in a relationship, or you're feeling very emotionally dysregulated, or you have a lot going on, or you're anxious, and there are reasons for that, there are absolutely ways that you can get help for that so you can feel more grounded in yourself, because there is absolutely, again, a difference between being needy and having needs, and also just being in a place where you do have higher needs, but there's a reason for that. And there's also support for that. This idea or concept of losing oneself, doesn't always have to just show up in those early relationships, but it can show up in long-term relationships and marriages as well. I can't tell you how many clients I've spoken to over the years where they share some of the challenges coming up in their relationship, where, for example, they might be primarily the ones managing the household, managing everything for the kids. They tend to accommodate the needs of their partner, and in terms of, day-to-day activities where they'll go on vacation. And it's really been interesting to hear them perhaps share something that they need, like if they need to go to an appointment or they need to do something for themselves. It's felt like an ask, like a big ask to request that perhaps their partner changes their schedule in order to accommodate their needs or whatever it is that they even want to do. And this question of want and need often comes up, and it feels like there has to be some kind of justification in order to make this ask. And so sometimes that just feels overwhelming to their nervous system. So they end up doing it themselves. And so that is another way that you can start to lose yourself in a relationship, because even though you're recognizing that there are some things you want or need, you feel really uncomfortable taking up the space and asking for them. And when we dig into this a little bit more of like, well, why is it difficult, or why is this challenging? There can certainly be underlying personal reasons, which I'll get into a little bit later, some of them at least. But what often also comes up is that this pattern has been established from the beginning of their relationship, and it's kind of just stuck. So maybe they started out as being accommodating, and that has essentially gone on for, 5, 10, 15 years of their relationship without really changing over time, or the dynamic shifting over time. What I've also seen in this scenario is that wasn't necessarily the initial plan. Like perhaps a lot of my clients tend to be women. I absolutely do work with men as well, but the majority are women. And so that's just the lens that I'm speaking through by sharing what I've experienced and who I've worked with. So a lot of the women that I have worked with, were naturally accommodating in the beginning because, one, that's their personality. They are caregivers. They enjoy that. There was nothing about it in the moment that felt perhaps awkward or that they were being pushed into anything. But so many of them kind of just assume that once they got to a certain point, or they did quote unquote enough, their partners would automatically start to reciprocate, because they would see how much they were doing and they would appreciate it, and they would just like step up in that way. And I guess what I want to say here is that while that certainly can happen, I have found it rare to see that happen unless there's been a specific conversation around it. And this isn't because the partner is bad or they don't want to be helpful or they're doing it on purpose. But again, it's a relationship dynamic. It's a pattern that got established really early on, and it's stuck. And both parties just kind of took on these roles. And so to change that later is absolutely possible. But if no one is communicating that desire for change, or that something feels off or imbalanced, nothing is really going to change. And so I would say that, as you enter into different kinds of relationships. You might be in a long-term partnership right now, and so you can work within that partnership. But in terms of other relationships that you enter, you might want to check in with that feeling of what does it feel like in the beginning? Are you noticing that you're holding back? Are there ways right from the beginning where you can be yourself and share your opinions and kind of just start right from the start of having more easeful back and forth so that you're not in a situation down the line where you get into this pattern or even this rut with somebody and it just becomes much harder to change. Of course, I'm going to add my take on this as someone who is highly sensitive and work with a lot of highly sensitive people. And one of the things I see with folks who are highly sensitive is that they are so naturally tuned into the needs of others and they desire a deep connection. Superficial connections are challenging for people who are highly sensitive. And so this combination of naturally being tuned into other people's needs and having this desire for deep connection, I think can absolutely lend itself to getting lost in other people. In fact, Elaine Aron, who is a psychologist and an author, she coined the term highly sensitive person, and she's also written a book called The Highly Sensitive Person. So if you haven't read that and you are HSP or you think you might be, it is definitely worth checking out. She's also written a ton of other books on high sensitivity and has done a lot of research. And one of the pieces of research she did revealed a characteristic in highly sensitive people called mate sensitivity. And so this is the ability to quickly assess what pleases our partner. And when we know what somebody wants, we try to make them happy. So, of course, this is a lovely quality because if you want deep connection and you care about people and you have this mate sensitivity and you can tell what makes other people happy, it's very natural to want to do those things. However, the challenge comes in when this becomes unbalanced, right? So if you often feel good about helping others, and this kind of feeds you in some way, it's so easy to then just keep putting other people's needs in front of your own. And while, again, when we live in community and we are in relationships and partnerships, there's nothing wrong with putting someone else's needs at different moments in front of our own. Like that is how we kind of survive in community over time. However, if that is the only way you're operating and you're then over time neglecting your needs, this can, of course, become problematic. And as I've been saying, if that's how you start a relationship, wanting to make somebody else happy and you end up pleasing and being accommodating, to a degree where over time that maybe doesn't feel quite as good, it's just harder to change the dynamic later. You can absolutely do it, but it is not uncommon for that dynamic to become more of a pattern or a habit over time. And again, each person kind of takes on their role. And one of the challenges, which I'm sure is not surprising to hear, is this buildup of resentment and frustration when the person realizes how much of themselves they have given away, maybe certainly accommodated, but maybe even they've given up things that they didn't realize because at the time it felt really good to be giving and want to make the other person happy. And somewhere in the back of their mind, they thought at some point this would be reciprocated. And when that doesn't happen, you can feel not only frustrated, but also angry and deeply resentful, and perhaps even to this place where you're judging yourself and you're questioning your decisions and just kind of feeling lost in the relationship. And that can be extremely disheartening for obvious reasons. So while this can definitely be a bit jarring, it can also really serve as a wake-up call for you in terms of how you're operating in relationships, but also for the relationship, because there might be a lot of thoughts around, this person's taking me for granted, or I've given so much and they're not giving back. And certainly that might be the case. Of course, every situation is different, but we can also pause to consider, what if you're just wired differently than the other person? So instead of thinking that your partner, in this example, if they don't act in the same way towards you as you do towards them, you make it mean that it's about how they feel about you. Instead of that, maybe you can start to reframe it and wonder, okay, if I were to tell this person what I needed, which means first you have to own what you want and what you need, and then if I was to communicate it to this person, to my partner, I would be giving them the opportunity to start to meet me in this place. And I have certainly learned over many years, whether it's been in romantic relationships or otherwise, that, people who are not highly sensitive just don't pick up on people's needs in the way that highly sensitive people do. They don't pick up on the needs of other people or the environment. It is just a different way of operating. It's not better or worse or good or bad. It's just simply different. And so in the past, if I've made assumptions or felt like, well, if I'm doing this for this person, they quote unquote should also do this for me, it might not even occur to them. And it has nothing to do about how they feel about me. It is just something that does not cross their mind. However, when I have gotten to a place where I can communicate it, I'm really in that place of giving them the opportunity to also meet me in terms of what I'm asking for. And, if they don't do it, then that's a whole different story for a different podcast. However, in this particular way of communicating, like you're really trying to tip the scales a little bit, right? Because you're giving them a chance to show up for you, like once they clearly know what you want. And that could really start to shift the dynamic. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, and I'm pretty certain that just telling this person once is not going to change it in one moment. But if you're both committed and you really start to own what you need, and you have to repeat it a bunch of times or remind the person, the dynamic really can shift over time. There's some other reasons where I've seen this happen in terms of this losing oneself is that someone might be really uncomfortable with receiving attention or taking up space, or even just not feeling worthy of expressing their needs, which often, will uncover different early life experiences. Perhaps there's been some trauma events or other situations that have created these types of feelings, but everything becomes cumulative, over time. And I really find that there's such a big intersection between being highly sensitive and having experience, like even maybe harsh conversations, if you're there and you have a sibling and your sibling's not highly sensitive, whatever, your parents or teachers or whoever is saying might just roll right off their back. But for you, if you are highly sensitive, you might really deeply internalize it. And so then that will impact, how you move forward. So there can be such a cumulative or compound effect of just our early life experiences, especially combined with having that trait of being highly sensitive, that I think can really create this dynamic of like wanting to please others, making people happy, and kind of losing ourselves because we really desire that deep connection. Which is one of the reasons in my work, while there is certainly a component of sharing your story, because it can be helpful for sure to have some context around some of your life experiences and certainly what's showing up now, when you actually do the work of shifting like how you're experiencing some of these things, like some of these fears or like hesitations that are coming up, or this feeling of it feels really scary to be visible or be seen or take up space, there's usually an unconscious component in there, working in there. And so that is really difficult to get to through our minds, because our minds will make up lots of stories for what the reason is or why it's there or how it's showing up. And that can give our brain some really great busy work. And like we can come up with all these ways and reasons for our current behavior. But I found that that will only take us so far in actually changing the behavior. So when you do work with some of those scary feelings a little bit more tangibly, like in terms of the sensations that are coming up in your body, you actually have an opportunity to shift how your nervous system is receiving them, and you shift the physiology, and you can find kind of a state of calm even in the midst of those scary feelings. And that's really what changes your reaction to the same thing the next time around. So just as a quick example, if somebody was like working with this idea of maybe I just don't feel worthy, enough to take space, but then I help them drop into their bodies with this idea of not feeling worthy, and they really can, drop the stories from their minds and tune into what they're noticing in their body. Often their bodies will reveal something, and this can be really difficult to articulate or even understand with our minds. But if you've ever done any kind of mind-body practice where your mind is really invited to get quiet and you're just tuning into your sensations, we all have instincts, right? We all have kind of this like flash of remembrance or thoughts or, what you might call a download. Like things will just appear in your awareness, like as more of a knowing. And this is what we can get to when we do the work to calm or still our mind so that we can drop into the body and really start to listen, right? We listen in a different way when you're listening to the sensations in your body versus when you're listening to like the ideas or thoughts or like different voices like in your mind. But in this moment, if you've been listening and you are noticing, you know what, I think I do, or I have given parts of myself away in a relationship, or maybe I haven't shown up as fully as I would like, or you're noticing that, in certain, friendships or other relationships, you do show up as yourself, but then maybe in your romantic partnership, you hide parts of yourself or you don't show up fully. There's probably something there to explore. So one of the things that you can really do in this coming week is just start to notice some of these patterns. So if there is a particular relationship that's come into your awareness, like as I've been sharing this with you, use that and think about the context of the relationship currently, however long it's been, and you can start to notice, am I myself? Do I feel relaxed? Can I just say what I feel? Like, do I feel like I am taking up space and I'm my own person? Or do I feel like I am extra accommodating, or maybe I clam up or feel a little bit resistant or shy or fearful of really dropping into who I am and feeling comfortable being myself. So as you start to notice that, you can start to notice that for different relationships in your life. And it's not uncommon for us to have a range of people. Like some people we feel super comfortable in ourselves with, and other people, we really hold back. And in some cases, that would be appropriate, right? Like you would, of course, be different with your boss than you would with your sibling, than you would with your partner, than you would with a friend. So there's certainly a quote unquote normal range of behavior that you would have with different people in your life. But if you're really talking about the people closest to you, if you start to notice this pattern of giving yourself away or being extra accommodating and not really expressing yourself or taking up that space, then it's really important to have that awareness, because awareness is the first step towards making change. And if you are someone who is very aware of this pattern in your life, and maybe you even know some of the reasons why this is the case for you, you might have had early experiences where they've impacted the way you show up. And despite knowing the connection and understanding it, you find yourself consistently getting into relationships where you're repeating the same pattern. As I was saying before, there's likely something that's unconscious that's running the show. And again, the best way to get to our unconscious is through our body. So if you are interested in looking for a body-based or somatic approach to really get to the root of this issue, I would love to support you. I work with people in a variety of ways, and you can check the link in the show notes. You can book a free consultation if you have some questions or you want to understand the work a little bit better. But if you're ready for a session, you can also just directly book an emotional clarity session so that your unconscious patterns are no longer running your relationships, and you really have this opportunity to shift that part of your nervous system that's holding on to this pattern of wanting to keep you safe. And you can experience deeper and more authentic connections in your relationships. If that is something you're interested in, please reach out. I hope that this episode has served you. And if you want to share any insights or ahas, you are welcome to message me. And I look forward to chatting with you the next time. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Transform Your Relationship podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to help more people find us so they can transform their relationships too. As a thank you, every month, we'll pick one winner to receive a free 45-minute one-on-one somatic coaching session with me to explore and gain clarity around a relationship challenge. And if you know somebody who could benefit from listening to the show, then please do share and help me reach more highly sensitive women who want to experience richer, more connected relationships.